G'day, and welcome to our very first podcast, Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible. My name is Peter Rowe. I'm not alone. There are three of us tonight to talk to you. If you're watching this, you're obviously streaming on YouTube, and you'll see where you can actually ask a question or make a comment and be involved. We're really looking forward. It's great to have your company. Just for those of you around the world who are listening at the moment or watching, we are broadcasting live right now from a little place called Perth in Western Australia. And it's fantastic to have your company tonight. We're going to have a whole bunch of fun. We could get a little bit controversial, but that's okay, because the name in itself, Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible, conjures up all sorts of thoughts. Well, we hope it does anyway. Now, the reason why we came up with that particular name, we endeavor to make the invisible visible. We're talking particularly about faith and belief in God. One of the things I discovered after being a Christian for 25 years was that everything wasn't visible. There were many invisible things, questions that I didn't have answers to. And after a long period of time, I got frustrated with that and decided to opt out and go it alone. Now, people like to label various people for what they believe or don't believe. There is atheism, there is agnostics. I'm somewhere in between. I haven't given up hope that there is a God, but I've not seen enough evidence to convince me that there is. So I'm kind of floating somewhere in between. And during that, hopefully throughout my life, I can get some answers to help me out. A couple of guys who are with me tonight to join in and hopefully answer your questions if you have any as well. And you can do that, as I mentioned, by checking out YouTube streaming right now. Ask us a question, and I'm sure between the three of us, we can come up with some sort of an answer. If not, we'll have a hell of a lot of fun trying. Richard Stiles is my first guest. Richard has been a Christian for a long time, started at the age of 10. He's 87 now, so he's been doing it for a little while. He's not really. He's in his mid-40s. And the other guy is Luke Feeney. And the guys joined me to have a bit of a chat. Thanks for joining us, guys. Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be a part of this. It's going to be a great night, that's for sure.
Yep. It's an absolute privilege, I think, to be able to join a conversation as important as this one. So thanks for having us, Peter.
Absolutely. Look, we've got to be honest with our audience and say this is not the first attempt at bringing all this together, but I think we've put aside the other trials and we've come up with something which we think is going to work. But it really is, for me, and I hope for you guys as well, about people who are perhaps listening. Now, what I mentioned before about my walk of 25 years and why I left may be something that our listeners are currently going through. There's an incredible amount of pressure on people within families that if you want to get out, there's a good chance you might be ostracized. I didn't go through that. No one else in my family really were believers. So I was able to just step out and go it alone and try and discover why I didn't experience the things that I was hoping to over that 25-year period. So hopefully tonight, people who are listening and watching, I'm hoping the questions or the ability to ask a question are on screen for you. Those questions will appear, fingers crossed, with technology on our screen, so we can talk about it. But I guess to fill the viewers in, Richard and Luke, perhaps we can go back and start about where it all started for you guys. How did it happen? When did it happen? Why did it happen? Richard, the floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, yes. So my name is Richard Stalls. And so it all started for me, look, quite young. Neither of my parents were Christians, but they did choose to send me to it was a little Baptist Sunday school. And I don't have too many memories of it, but I do remember enjoying it. I remembered being, being a part of it and enjoying the process. But it was when I was about 10 years old, as it is in that tradition, is, wanting to follow God, wanting to take that next step with Him. The thing we do is we say the sinner's prayer. So I remembered going to my aunt and asking her, saying, I want to become a Christian. And she says, well, here's the prayer. So we, prayed the prayer. God, I'm sorry for my sins. I ask you into my heart. And so that started the journey for me when I was 10. But, and the first few years, you're young, you're growing into it. But as I became a teenager, I do remember just getting more and more fascinated with this whole, I don't know, I struggle with the words, like this whole alternate reality. So there's like the story that is generally told, and you'd go to church and you hear this amazing story of this guy called Jesus doing these things and dying on a cross, and it really captivated my imagination, I guess, and drew me right into that. That's, I guess, the story of meaning for life. And it was, as a teenager, I really, both feet in, really committed myself to, I guess, the life of faith, the life of the church. And so that's sort of where it started for me. And I guess a couple of little snatches along the way. End of high school, I did start getting trained to be a Baptist minister. So I spent 2 years in theology training there. After that, I fell in with, according to the little Baptist church I was involved in, fell in with a bad crowd, the Pentecostals. So that sort of ended my Baptist career and started my career with the Pentecostals. Loved the church there, had some great experiences, but the progression of faith has always been in that sort of Protestant evangelical, and in the end that charismatic or spirit-filled kind of churches. And so that's what got me going, I guess. There's more to the story, but we'll unpack that as we keep going.
It's a great story, an interesting one for a man who's been around for as long as you have. Vastly different from my story, and quite a degree different from Luke as well, who was formerly a pastor. So Luke, tell us your story.
My story, it's hard to know when to begin. It was a dark and stormy night in October 1986. No, I
like that.
I tend to feel that I came to faith properly, really as an adult, as a young adult. I was raised, my parents became sort of Catholic Church of England in order to get me into the local Catholic school. And so I went through that, went to the Catholic school. I always believed in God. It's funny, it never really occurred to me that I don't believe what's going on here, but I certainly wasn't convinced that that this was how we were to really interact with God. That Catholic way was the way. And actually, if it was, I was like, well, okay, I don't really want to continue in that. I guess I didn't really see the value of it as a young kid who knows it all. And so coming out of high school, I sort of just left it and didn't really think much more of it until I came to meet my now wife. She had grown up in the church. Her uncle was a minister, a pastor for some local churches. And so she'd grown up in it. I ended up going along with her one day to a Pentecostal church, and it blew my mind. It was just an experience that I had no idea that there were these other expressions of how to actually worship God, of how to be in relationship with God. For me, church was very one-dimensional. This was church. And so I just expected to go back to exactly the same thing that I went to school experiencing. And for me, it was pretty fundamental. It was quite a significant moment to realize that, wow, okay, so there is this whole other way of expressing a relationship with God. I really very much had an encounter in that moment and had a thirst then to just want to understand more. It was almost like I thought I had it figured out, but then God got bigger. And so I fell in love at that point, and I wanted to explore that. And I did. And I started reading, I started devouring everything I could, and I never really stopped. And I feel that over the journey, I've had several moments like that where I've kind of thought that I had God figured out. You get into a church and you go, okay, cool. This is what worship looks like. This is what God's like. This is what God thinks. This is how God feels. And then all of a sudden these moments come along where your mind sort of expands and you realize, wow, okay, maybe God's bigger than I thought it was. Maybe there's more to this church thing than I realized. And at each of those moments, I got very, very excited and kind of dove in. So I'm in a very different place now. I feel like my faith is stronger than it ever has been, but it's very, very different to what I ever thought it would be as well. So I'm excited to explore that. Like Richard said, there's much more to the story, but that's the Cliff Notes version of it. And so we ended up here on this podcast, wrestling with these tough questions.
Yeah, look, it is an amazing experience. I don't know any podcasts that is similar to this. My daughter was trying to think of names for the podcast, and my daughter came up with a ripper saying an atheist, a pastor, and a Christian will walk into a bar. And it's very much like that. You don't really know what you're going to get. One of the things I have noticed, guys, throughout my 25 years that I spent as a Christian, which is around 1987, something about those mid to late 80s that hooked a few people in, is that no matter where you come from, no matter what your story is, there seems to be so many similar degrees of frustration. It's like no matter how long you're a Christian for, no matter how many times you go to church, now how many friends you make, no matter how many times you pray, there's always this sense of, I don't know it all. I don't have it all. There's bits missing. I can't find, and we were on SMS today, on Messenger rather today, talking about various stuff that we were going to discuss, and that was something that came through, that there's always something kind of missing. For me, for my story that started back in 87, my life had come to an abrupt end, as it were. I had a band in Perth that was successful and I was going really well. And I ended up with a long story very short. As the singer, I had a vocal cord issue. There was a tumor growing on my vocal cords. Thankfully, it was benign. It wasn't malignant, but the specialist said, that's the end of your singing career right there, mate, and you may never talk again for the rest of your life. Now, thankfully, God love him, he was wrong, and I ended up with a vocal range better than I had before. But in the meantime, all the guys had left, and I had nothing to show for my 32 years, I think I was around about then. And so I was at my lowest ebb. People often used to say, oh, you only turn to God because your life was a mess, mate. Damn straight. That is a really good reason to do it. And there are two schools of thought. There was either that God did it to me to get my attention, or whatever that other school of thought is, I don't know. But you've got to kind of look at it and go, well, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Why is this what I need in my life? And again, a long story, very short. I had a fairly traumatic conversion. I was full on. I even did 7 years Christian ministry with a radio station here in Perth, Sunshine FM, which is Australia's first Christian radio station. That was amazing. That was incredible. So then I went on this journey and everything was just going dandy. I had all the answers. I had no doubts. It was there. I think this is so easy. Oh, wow. And then for me, I'm very much a practical person. I love evidence and I love proof. And I got to the point where I thought, hang on a minute, this is not working for me. This is not real. I've prayed 400 times today and none of those prayers have come true. What is going on? So then it became like a numbers game to me about trying to validate your belief and see results that you could actually go, yes, I can measure that. I can see that. I can count that. But it got to the point where it just, the ledger was so lopsided. The scales were not lining up, and I just thought, I can't continue on believing something that I don't believe in. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. And it was a very dramatic realization to get to that point, to become who you are. Well, your friends are Christian, you go to church, you do all this stuff, and it was a long, complex, beautiful journey. And suddenly you're faced with, I can't do this anymore. And it's not a rare story. You hear about it all around the world, pastors and preachers and that, just saying, I can't do this anymore. This is not what I believe in. Dan Barker, one of the most renowned Australian pastors who did that in the late, he was getting out of preaching when we were getting into Christianity in the mid to late 80s, I think it was for him. So then I decided to just step away. And it wasn't easy. It was a long process to get to the point where I thought, this is just not, I can't pretend anymore. People say, well, why don't you just go back to God? I can't. It's not real. It's like saying, why don't you just become a Scientologist? Well, why would I do that? It doesn't feel real either. Sorry, Scientologists, if you're out there to pick a name, just plucked it out of the air. So I stepped away and have been looking ever since. That was probably about, I don't know, 10 years ago. Started looking at what is the alternative. What do I do now? How do I find out the truth? And I found a great deal of freedom in doing that, an enormous amount of freedom. I don't know about you guys, but I think the Christian life is a fairly guilt-ridden one. We're told that we're nothing without God. We're sinners. We're broken. We're doomed. We're nothing without God. And I think that a lot of that negative commentary is really it's disabling. It's not uplifting, and it's not helpful. And I just to be away from all of that was well and truly worth it. If you're listening tonight and you're in that place, jump on, give us a call, as it were, through YouTube. It's streaming live right now, right around the world. Great to have you listening. If you got a question, we would love to talk to you. We want you to ask us questions so that we can keep running this, because it's incredibly complex. We could sit here talking for 100 years and we'll still never come up with an agreement about certain things and an understanding about certain things. It is an incredibly complex journey. That's why we decided to do this podcast. Hopefully it works. Hopefully it's helpful, and hopefully we can all learn something. And even the time that it's taken to get to this point, we have learned from each other already. It's fantastic. That's where we are. I guess where we go from here is anybody's guess at this stage. But I think we all share frustration, and perhaps that's something that we can talk about, the commonality with being a believer. And just as a side note too, we're not just going to talk about religion, God, Christianity. That is something that we all have shared and all have in common, obviously. But there are so many beliefs around the world based upon the same premise that I think, which is believing in something without good evidence. That's pretty much the theme of making the invisible visible. That's why it's called that, because we want to make the invisible that we don't see somehow become clearer and somehow real, that we can understand exactly what it is that we're going through. There
so
we go.
Good. Now, as you're speaking, I was thinking, on the surface, especially with your daughter's alternative name, which I'm liking more and more, the atheist believer and a pastor walk into a bar. We just need a bar now, I guess. But
I was going to say, got to change venue.
Change venue, yeah. Maybe that'll be a special event. Once we get a bit of an audience, we'll do a live event in a bar. That would be brilliant.
Absolutely, I'm there.
But I was thinking on the surface, in some lenses, very, very different people with different approaches to belief, but on another lens, very similar. And you're putting it there with this frustration with belief. And I think, Luke may nuance it a little bit, but this idea of making the invisible visible is fascinating to me too, because for me personally, I'm a bit of an intellectual kind of person. So, I'm doing a PhD in education. So I love the nitty gritty. I love the depth of it. But for me, belief is more than just hanging on to some ideas because I hope it to be true. I need some very strong justification. And I think on that end, we're quite similar. We might have slightly different conclusions. Actually, we've probably got different conclusions to a lot of the things, but I think that commonality means that there's a strong meeting point for dialogue and wrestling over things when you can both agree that you need some kind of evidence, some kind of justification for your belief. That's a good starting point. And we didn't get to the point where I hit my frustrations with Christianity. And for me, the things that really, for my belief system, that really knocked me for six was that as a young guy, I was captivated by this beautiful story. And the longer I stayed in it, the more I encountered some of the real ugly side of it. And I felt quite betrayed, I guess, is probably a good thing. I mean, I was sold this beautiful story, and the longer I hung out with people, especially as time went on, it seemed like the story started changing from an alternative community founded in love and following after God to very sort of factional, partisan, them versus us. We're the best because we can tick all the right boxes, and we don't watch this and we don't drink that, so therefore we're better, and we've got all the answers when we clearly don't. So I was really getting frustrated with that, and I guess for me part of it was an intellectual thing, but part of it really was strange for me, because being an intellectual person, you'd think all the intellectual arguments around belief would be the thing that really did it, but it was the lack of beauty. You know, surely if it's something that's true, it can't be ugly and damaging and you said it's a disabling. Surely something true can't be that. And so that's what I hit the wall. Was funny that it hit it's the barrier of beauty. This thing's ugly, which caused me to really dig into that. And there's some things, we can unpack with that. But, justification for your belief is, for me, there's an intellectual, there's an evidentiary thing, but there's an aesthetic, I guess. If it's true, it has to be beautiful, it has to be good, it has to be wise, it has to be encompassing. Some things that we'll unpack as we go over the weeks and months ahead. But yeah, so that's my frustration with this thing that could be so beautiful can be turned into such an ugly thing, belief.
Do you guys get the sense in your time that, and just what you just said then, Richard, that there's it's, for want of another word, arrogance, that you can only experience the beauty and love and kindness and generosity and all that stuff if you know God. I know so many people in my time who fly the banner of Christianity and are so far off the mark, it's not funny. And yet you meet other people who are absolutely beautiful, who show no interest in believing that there is a God. And it's important to say you don't need to have a belief system at all to be a lovely, kind person and experience all of that beauty. It's not an automatic thing. You go, oh, wow, just become a Christian. I just realized I never saw any of this stuff before. That does happen. There's no question it does happen, but there's a real sense of ownership that, well, I've got this. And I experienced it a little bit myself, almost like a talking down to people going, well, you just don't understand what it's like. I got access to the man, I am special. I am enlightened. Do you guys experience that as well in your time, Luke?
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate very much with that. You can slip into an elitism, and it's funny for a faith that follows someone who literally came to break down barriers and destroy not just the barriers between us and them, but the illusion that there ever was a barrier between us and them, to completely remove the concept of the other. Jesus uses words like neighbor, and instead it's for a faith that has been built around following someone like that it's scary how easy we slip into an elitism that puts up fences, and that almost delights in the fact that there is an us and them, that we have the answers and other people don't, so to speak. It's not me saying it, but that's that attitude. And what you both have been saying has resonated with me a great deal. I think in terms of belief, a belief that cannot be interrogated, I don't think we can call a belief. I don't know what you would call it. A wish. I don't know, but it certainly for me wouldn't be a belief. We have to be able to interrogate these things. And I think the beauty of the three of us coming together, which Peter, you may call chance, and for me, I may think that there was someone else involved that might have orchestrated something like this.
That's it. He stepped over the line.
The big fella.
You couldn't just let it go. Yeah.
But if you'll forgive me for that, I think it's actually
Absolutely.
amazing that the three of us, I think the three of us encountered very, very similar situations, very, very similar frustrations, the same sort of fork in the road. We may have come to different conclusions, chosen different paths, and gone on different journeys, and that's great. I think that's okay. Diversity is beautiful, but the commonality of these frustrations that we felt, I think, is great. And the reason I think it's great is because we're not the only ones that experience that. But the sad fact is that there is a huge amount of people that come up against this, and instead of facing it and having the courage to either go, I don't want to believe in this anymore, I'm done, I'm going to become an agnostic, atheist, whatever, or I need to start to reevaluate some of these things and reinterrogate my belief and change my views because this isn't right. Instead, what a lot of us will do is we'll just shove it down, because everything in us is screaming, don't mess things up. Things are okay now. Let's just keep it. And then there's all the external pressures of pastors and leaders and parents and family and church members, and because no one wants to do this. And I've kind of found this out the hard way in a sense. I was very naive because I didn't grow up in the faith. I kind of came in. So as my theology was changing and as I'm reading stuff and it's growing and I'm like, oh, wow, I thought God was like this, but actually it's like this. I thought the Bible was like this, but actually it's kind of like this. I just ran with it. So I would preach it and I would teach it and I would talk about it. But it almost got uncomfortable because I didn't realize that a lot of people, these are things that apparently you're not allowed to muck around with, which I didn't understand that. And it didn't stop me. I did it anyway. But it's it actually blew my mind thinking that there are these no-go areas that, oh no, this is our doctrine or this is our statement of faith or our creed, and therefore we can't ever change that. We can't interrogate that. And it blew my mind because I'm thinking, well, but why? I mean, the one-dimensionality idea of faith being we've got it all figured out and this is what God looks like. I think that's what breeds that sense of what you were talking about, Peter, of that elitism, that arrogance, because it's like, well, of course you can only experience beauty in this concept. Of course God is only going to operate in this aspect. Oh, that Muslim family over there, there's no way they could experience the beauty of God. There's no way they could experience this sort of encounter. Like God wouldn't be doing it. So what are you talking about? It's almost cartoonish how we've put God into a certain image and box that suits how we do it. So yeah, that was very much something that led for me to start to experiment with a different way forward, realizing that maybe the church could be done in a different way, and maybe Jesus is better than I thought.
I think one of the biggest problems and frustrations for me is that you do think as a Christian often that we've got all the answers, that there is no other way you can experience the kind of joy. And I know personally, I used to live on a commune down south of our beautiful state, Western Australia, between Albany and Denmark. Beautiful country if you ever get a chance. Wherever you are in the world, book a flight, go and see Denmark and Albany. It's just stunning. And I lived on a commune back there. And some of the things I experienced, like they used to have a thing called a confest at Nanga Forest in Dwellingup. And you'd go to a pine tree, and at the bottom of the pine tree, there'd be a guru or a monk under each tree, and you just go and sit and talk. And I've got to tell you, believing in God does not have a monopoly on feeling amazing spiritual contact and joy. And I mean, remember the Orange people, the Anandamaga? They had this bunch of people at the front playing a guitar, and we're all sort of walking along in the dust between the pine trees in the Nanga Forest, this like hands in the air with this chant. And I've got to tell you, I experienced a lot of amazing things as a Christian. There's no separation between the joy. And this is one of the things I think that part of my frustration is knowing that I'd experienced these kind of things before. And then suddenly Christians claiming that that was the only way you could experience that. And I thought, No, it's not. It absolutely is not. You can, and one of the things, and I'll say this is probably a bit controversial early on in the podcast, but there are many things that I experienced that I thought were unique to the church, which I've experienced outside of the church. And that the claim is that you can only experience this with God. And my experience is that simply isn't true. So that became annoying and frustrating to me, going, well, you haven't got a monopoly on it. There are some things that you guys would probably argue that you can only experience with God. But I remember Christopher Hitchens, before he died, one of the world famous atheists, said, there's nothing you can experience that I can't experience without God. And he put up $10,000 or something, I think, for someone to come up with something that they could experience as a Christian that he could not experience as an atheist. And he went to his grave with that money still in his pocket. So, yeah, it's what's called a right angle turn, people. And we just went down that little path for a bit. But I think that, one of the things I want to do with this, and you guys do it freely, obviously, is stuff pops up. We don't necessarily. I was reluctant to write out a list of things to stick to, because they're great to fall back on if everyone sort of goes silent and can't think of anything. But these conversations between our lives and between what's going on in the world and everything, I mean, wow. I mean, you could not possibly run out of things to talk about, and hopefully we can cover them. But just as a side thing, Richard, how will we know questions are coming through from people on YouTube streaming now?
Okay, so this gives you a hint into our dynamics as well. We're also, if you're looking at me now, I'm the resident geek, so I'm the one who set up the stream. So I've got access to watching the chat come in if there's anybody joining for that. Obviously, being our first episode together that's gone out, we'll get some traction as we go. But there would be people watching and listening to this, after this has been live. And we will also, welcome your comments there, because we'll keep revisiting and including those questions into further episodes as well, even if you aren't live and putting the questions in. But yeah, I can see the questions come in if they're put up there.
Or the complete lack of them. We didn't promote this prior, so our expectations were that there wouldn't be questions coming in unless someone just stumbles across YouTube. This thing pops up, they check it out, and they may join in. That's fine. We will be around about another 45 minutes, around about 9:30 Australian Western Standard Time is right now. It's 20 to 9, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let's hope we get some questions through, but if not, let's continue on.
There was one thing that you spoke about, and I think we could probably spend a good episode unpacking this one time, is this relationship with belief and power. This idea of exclusivity. I don't know how valid it is, especially humans experience human things, and Christopher Hitchens, I think he was onto something right. He's like, I'm a human, you're a human. I'm able to experience the range of human things, whether I'm encountering it in your understanding of God or not. So that's something there. And I think, so for me, who would definitely classify themselves as a Christian, Pentecostal, small p Pentecostal, struggling with my stuff, wanting to believe even more, interrogating it. Maybe I'm just not that good Christian, but I don't have a problem with what Christopher Hitchens said. I'll be like, dude, keep your money. That's a great little bet. I don't think anybody's going to prove that. Maybe it's because I've got a real high value for the humanity. And maybe I never got that kind of exclusivity, especially now later on, is because I've always been at the periphery of the power structures of church. I've never been on staff, except for right in the beginning when I was in that little Baptist church. But then I was right in the periphery. I was just this young guy, knew nothing, running a youth group, which is what we do. We're like, hey, do you know anything? No. Okay, come run our youth group for us.
Come shepherd our next generation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, take care of.
Yes, I managed to avoid all of that, thankfully.
But I think there's something to be explored with this idea of power and belief, and especially when it comes into exclusivity, we've got the answers, come to us. I think that's a corrupting influence in belief.
It's hard though, Richard, because that's a word often used, isn't it? God is power, God is love, God is the most almighty power. Anything that needs to be achieved can be done with that power. And then you're a born again believer, you've got the spirit of Jesus, you've got the power. You've got the power to change things, you know. You can even walk on water like Jesus did. You've got the power to heal people, to change things that are about to happen. You buy into that, and you get to the feeling like, you know, I am power. I did some crazy things with believing that I was super power and super protect, not in a cocky or arrogant way, but in a brave way, that I can do this. You can't harm me because I've got the power of Jesus, you know. And I did some crazy things, knowing that, well, thinking that that's who I was, and I think that was lacking in a great deal of wisdom as a young man.
Can I just say something, Luke? You're going to jump in, and I think I'm triggered you with the power. With the power thing. I know you've got a lot to say about
you know me too well, mate.
That could be his last name, by the way, Luke Power.
I'm changing it now.
Go for it, mate. Go, just as long as you credit me for coming up with the idea.
I will.
I want a part of the royalties.
Yeah, you can have them. You can have them all.
Mate.
Were you going to say something, Rich, or were you
No, I was just going to say, I know this is something that you speak about a lot.
Yeah, it's funny. There are some things. There are some things that I really, really get to me in a sense, and I do. I feel it's the Holy Spirit. It's I feel that's something in me that says, yeah, this is an area that that you need to know more about, you know. And I think it's the ones that don't quite sit right with me. And this fascination that the church has with power, I think has lost its way a bit. And when I say this, I want to be upfront. I believe in the power of God. I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. I've seen all sorts of stuff. I understand that side of it, but I also understand the allure of that, for that to become the main thing. You know, revival is only revival if you have these crazy works breaking out in a particular space. It's the Holy Spirit is only making himself shown in you if you are dominating in this area or whatnot. We love these acts of power, these displays of power. But when I look back and I read the Gospels and I see Jesus, did he do that stuff? Sure, but half the time after he did them, he's just like, don't tell anybody. Yeah, it was never about these acts of power. And even in Pentecost, and when the Holy Spirit comes, and it was actually never about this is what it's all about. The true power that I read about, that I understand, that Jesus is displaying, is power in weakness. It's power in humility. It's having all the power in the world when you are truly innocent, everything's gone wrong, you know you're going to the cross, everyone's expecting you to rain down fire or to get angels to come down, you know, to overthrow the Roman Empire, to do all of this sort of stuff to save yourself. You can do it. You've got all the power in the world, but instead he models it by laying it down and forgiving, you know, loving the Romans right to the very end. That's a disruptive power. That's a power in restraint, a power in weakness, and a power in love. That's not the power that's popular that we like to talk about. We might preach about it. We might talk about it in a theological sense, but it very rarely manifests in actually how we embody it. It's because it doesn't seem to make sense, you know. Power in weakness, you know. Power in restraint, in non-violent resistance, rather than forcing yourself, your agenda, your will. We see this in Christendom or Christian nationalism, where it's all about we need to dominate the government and we need to get Christians in these places because that's the only way we're going to change the world. It's like, what are you talking about? The power is in actually laying yourself down, being within the margins, choosing to love, choosing to forgive, all the stuff that doesn't seem popular or cool or even effective, but somehow it's the most transforming love it's the most transforming essence. It's what holds the world together somehow. And yet we don't often talk about that power. And you see this all through the Christian narrative. You got Caesar on a war horse and you got Jesus on a donkey. We want the lion, but he comes as a lamb. All of these, but it's easy for us to tell the story that I guess we contort to what we expect power to look like, and we can then go back and say, yeah, well, here we go, this, and we'll make it kind of fit that narrative. Again, this is why I think we need to really interrogate this. This is one of the projects I'm working on at the moment, is these flawed stories where we need to actually be able to go back, relook at them and say, well, we need to rewrite these stories because maybe that's not quite accurate. So the power thing does get me. It's a big trigger. And even the whole thing about what you were saying, Peter, around, we're protected, nothing can harm me. Yeah, there's some Psalms in there that talk about God, be my shield and protect me and all that sort of stuff. But there's nothing in there that talks about if you're a Christian, you are then protected by God. If that's the case, I mean, what happened to all of the disciples? They suffered horrific deaths on the back of Jesus' horrific death. There's that was never a that was never one of the perks in the sign-up sheet. Yet somehow we've somehow kind of turned that into it. But what happens, and here's the danger, when we speak a narrative, when we tell a story like that, that's all well and good when things are going okay. What happens when God doesn't protect you, or you lose a loved one, or you're paralyzed, or something comes along? Your theology, your understanding of God just is exploded. And that's not your fault. And that's not a wisdom thing. That's not a naive thing. That's because that's the story we've been told. And we haven't been told that we're allowed to interrogate and question that. But we absolutely need to, because when you're grieving, or when you're injured, or you're going through something like that, that's often not the best time to be navigating a crisis in faith, because you should be focusing on other stuff, right? So if the church created an environment and a culture where we actually encourage this stuff to be happening before the shit hits the fan, that might be a better way to do it. But you've got to give up a lot of control to do that. So
if you've just tuned in, this is not the Bible Hour. It might be a little bit confusing if you've tuned in going, who are these three guys? This is called Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible. We have just launched this podcast around about 50 minutes ago, navigating our way through all sorts of interesting things, from our stories. I am the rose between two thorns. I am the atheist among us. Well, actually, I'm not going to call myself an atheist, because I'm floating somewhere between atheism and agnosticism. It's an unsure. Just needless to say, I do not believe in a God. I am somewhere in between, so that it is. I've not seen enough evidence to convince me that there is not a God. I hope that's clear, because a lot of people think atheism is a belief system in itself, and it is not. It's not a belief system at all. It's just that I have not seen. You'll hear Ricky Gervais and other people around the world convey what their belief system is, and that's pretty much where I'm at. If there is a God, he would know exactly, or she or it would know exactly what it would take to convince me that they were real. And I'm open, and I'm willing to give it a crack. But up until now, I've not heard anything or seen anything. If you are streaming on YouTube, which would be it's the right thing to say, but considering there's no other social media format that we're broadcasting on at the moment, it might end up on Spotify. But if you want to ask a question of us, you've got two Christian men, and you've got myself, who is a non-believer. Hopefully, we can have a chat with you and open up the conversation for whatever that might be. We're completely open. It is an unusual format. It's taken me weeks and weeks and weeks to try and fit this into some sort of a format. I can't think of a model that we could copy off. I think that may be because no one else was silly enough to join up. And it is a unique combining. It is a unique trilogy that we have here. That was not an intended line either, but it is interesting because we are respectful, and as we go down the track, we will hopefully do this once a week on a Wednesday night. That's again Australian Western Standard Time. Things, if these guys are saying stuff that I think is rubbish, I don't believe. I have no issue with calling for them to explain their claim. The claim and the burden of proof is on Richard and Luke, because they are claiming that God is real. I'm not claiming that God isn't real, so I'm off the hook. The burden of proof is with them to prove that God is real, and I look forward to hearing their arguments, to seeing the evidence. Although in my experience, the complete lack of it. That was a snide little dig there at my friends, but we're respectful. We do appreciate and respect each other's views, but let's be real about it. You believe in something that I don't, and it's a fascination. It is absolutely enthralling. One of the other things I wanted to talk about too at some stage, whether it's tonight or down the track or whatever, the amount of disagreement within the church. Now, you are a former pastor, Luke, hopefully to be back in that position down the track a little bit. If I put you where you are and put another pastor and started discussing theology, guarantee that you're going to disagree. Back in the day, it was not uncommon for the church that I went to slag off every other church in Perth because they're so much better than everyone else, and they were doing the same things to us. And there's an incredible amount of competition and aggravation between preachers and leaders and church philosophies and principles and the whole thing. It's one of the things that drives me crazy. It's such a mess. It is such a mess. Trying to just come together to share something is incredibly difficult. And there are so many denominations, there are so many churches, there are so many different ideas. That to me is a very difficult thing to be successful at. It's pre-doomed almost, isn't it?
It is. Sorry, I think my dog's dying in the background. Apologize for that.
Oh, that's no good. Hope it's not.
just coughing. He's all right. He's all right. It's funny. I liked how you said that, and I can actually confirm. I've had almost every conversation with another pastor that I've had. Part of our discussion has been differences in theology and in beliefs, and that's it within the same denomination, within the same movement, within the same church sometimes. It's funny, I tend to look at that as a beautiful thing. I think the church has almost idolized certainty around doctrine and statements of belief and things like that, and has elevated being certain about something, particularly around a belief, as the goal, or a badge, or when I don't think that's what it is. I don't think that's how, in my experience, that's my faith has never grown through certainty. It's only ever grown through uncertainty, through doubt, and actually, the only times my faith has stagnated has been when I've gripped my theological beliefs about what I thought was right so tightly that I was not prepared to let them go. And you could give me all the reason, all the evidence, all of the none of that matters, because you're so afraid that if you let one small bit go, that it's like a house of cards. It's going to come tumbling down.
Vulnerability is not one of the things you want to experience, is it?
No.
It's not. But here's the paradox. It's essential. In my experience, and in the experience of many others who I've spoken to, your faith only really does grow when and evolve and change and mature when you are prepared to hold these things loosely, when you're prepared to actually let go of that certainty and needing to be right. It allows you to have a conversation with people like yourself who we might be on the different page with different things, and you are genuinely open. Or and you read things and you watch things, or you speak to people who think differently to you, and you are genuinely open to changing different things. People are afraid of that type of faith because they think that it's wishy-washy and that you end up believing anything and everything. But that's not what I'm talking about. There's been plenty of times where I've spoken to someone, I'm going, yeah, no, I'm not going down that path because I don't believe that. But there's also been plenty where I've gone, wow, I've never thought about that, and I need to wrestle with that some more. And it's led to growth. For me, that's the beauty of faith. If our whole argument stems on being right, or 30,000 different Christian denominations, that kind of kills your whole argument, doesn't it? Because they can't all be right.
Is it? Well, that was exactly what I was going to ask. Is it possible that you're all right? It's just a different perspective on the same truth.
On certain things, absolutely. Yeah, you'll find of
you
those.
Can't prove you can't prove it. Another pastor is wrong by disagreeing with what he says. That's just your opinion. There's no facts
Correct.
to back up your statement, I guess.
Absolutely. That's right. And a lot of these things that we're differing on, they're theological things where it's very hard to actually determine. There is no evidence that's going to say it's one way or the other, because everything's an interpretation. Every translation is an interpretation. Every statement of faith, every creed, every doctrine is an interpretation. Some of them are very good interpretations. They're sound. They're from, they're built on something that's actually solid, and I think they're correct. Some of them are rubbish. But the thing with belief is our brain doesn't care whether something's true or not. It cares whether it makes sense. That's how our brain works. If the story makes sense and it will protect us, the brain goes, I'm happy, I'll lock that down. And then that's compounded if someone that we trust or other people we trust tell that same story, it's locked down. So then someone like us comes along and says, hey, maybe God isn't coming back in this violent way, or maybe the earth wasn't built in 7 days and that's like a poem, or there's another way to do that, and they go shut down because it's a self-protection mechanism. But you're right, we can't all be right.
If you've got like 10 pastors in a room and we're talking about stories or meta narratives and interpretations of philosophy, there's some different stories you can tell. But those 10 pastors are also, many of them are going to come up and talk about propositional truths, going to say, this is a truth about how reality is. And if 10 of them are saying different things, you're correct. At least 9 of them, possibly 10 of them, have to be wrong. That's how logic works. This is how rational discussion works. And I think that's a very good challenge on a lot of these truth claims about reality that different belief systems, we're talking about Christianity now, but, folk beliefs are, we were talking about before about psychics, and then you even go into how, Scientology, and, there's a whole range of belief systems that make very definite claims of how the world actually is. And I think, they can't all be right. You can't say it's red, no, it's blue. Well, maybe you can because they're experiential, but you can't say that is the wave, that's that wavelength of light, and you say, no, that's a different wavelength. There's something you can test. You can't all be right, and we need to interrogate it. And if we found that thing is just not true, a retreat to holding on to quote unquote faith or belief in the face of actual evidence is foolish and damaging to your humanity. So yeah, we need to be serious about beliefs. If it's worth believing, it's worth interrogating, it's worth asking for evidence.
So what does that say about the claims that the religion is just purely man-made? And Luke mentioned before about how important faith is, and this is a particular thing when it comes to what you're talking about, Richard, because what I have discovered is that faith is not a mechanism to find the truth at all. Because if I tell you that I've seen fairies in the garden talking to frogs, you're going to go, well, that's just ridiculous. I said, well, I believe it. I have faith that they're there. Can you prove it? Nope. Can you prove that they're not there? Nope. So faith didn't get me anywhere. So I can believe whatever I like based upon faith. Now, if you insert that faith, the same word, into what we're talking about to try and prove or disprove or believe or disbelieve in religion, it makes no sense. And this is the problem. How do you fix the problem that you're just talking about, where everyone disagrees and everyone's confused? It's like here's this thing that we've all created. Now you all go away and you come up with any damn way, thought, mechanism, whatever you please. You just go away and put it all together. Call it what you like, build a church, invite people in, tell them your way. And of course, around the world, you see things like in Waco, Texas, all those years ago, dying because of some nut, and people are starting up cults all around the world every day, and people are getting sucked in because people are charismatic and they can convince people that there's a truth about what it is that they're saying. And at the end of the day, discernment is incredibly difficult depending on so many different things about your lifestyle, whether you're impaired or whether you're gullible or whether you're poor or whether whatever. And I find that stepping away from all of that might seem strange to people like yourself. Might seem strange to think, what happened? Why did it get to the point where he felt like he needed to back away? And what seems to be an argument you guys are putting forward to a degree, to me, is just confirmation of like, wow, this is just crazy. To me, it looks like a man-made religion gone mad. And we try as hard as we can to box it into some kind of thing that makes sense to us. We can wrap our heads somehow around this because I need to know it's true. I need to believe it. I need to ignore the fact there's no empirical evidence to support my claim. There's no logic to it. I don't live this way any other way in my life based upon this. And yet here it is in all its craziness, in all its hypocrisy and anger and ugliness. Bang, this is what I choose to believe in. And I know what it's like because that's exactly what I did for 25 years of my life.
If I can weigh in, I've got a couple of thoughts just on that. I'm trying to work out where to start. So first of all, I have thoughts around the distinction between Christianity versus other man-made religions and the differentials. And we can go there if you want to afterwards, but I don't really want to get bogged down into like an apologetics type thing around the distinctives, although I'm happy to go there if you want to. But the more interesting thing to me is, as I was thinking and hearing you speak about that, is this idea of faith and the requirement of evidence. I think faith that doesn't lead to some form of action, some form of life, is irrelevant. It's a waste. You see that in the Bible, in the book of James, he talks about it. But the idea that faith on its own, just this belief in something, is enough, I don't necessarily subscribe to. But there's all sorts of evidence outside of just religion, outside of just belief in God, where we see this play out. So when I got married, I had faith that the woman I was marrying, that my life together would be great, and that it would
But
work
you had
out
evidence
great.
too.
I
You
did. I
weren't
had
relying on
evidence.
faith, you're relying on your actual experience with her. So faith wasn't necessary because you had facts in front of you.
Yeah, I had evidence to a degree. I had indicators. I had experiences with her that made me think, yes, this is the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I think that it's going to work out okay. But I also didn't have certainty. There was no evidence of the fact that it actually would. There still isn't. And for me, it's the same with God. You know, I've had experiences, I've had moments, I've had all these sort of things that indicate to me that why I want to engage in continue engaging in faith with God. Do I have evidence of that? Like, do I have when I say evidence, do I have certainty around the like something wrapped up in a nightly in a nice bow that says this is your proof? I don't, and I never will. But I have enough encounters, enough evidence for me to want to continue to engage because, and this ties into what we were saying before, it invites me into a life that I believe, and an action that I believe is worthwhile, that bears fruit. It's not exclusive. There are many lives that don't believe in God or believe in other gods that bear great fruit and are beautiful. And so I'm not claiming that at all. But I know in my own experience, for me, life with God has been infinitely better than life without. I think the way our belief functions is actually more important than the content of what we believe. That's a big revelation for me, and that's something I've had to wrestle with for a very long time. And I'll say it again, the way our belief functions means more than what we actually say we believe. And that, for me, is how I've managed to discern kind of the direction of my theology and my beliefs in the space of 10 pastors in a room, in the space of 30,000 different denominations. I don't have something that I can say, that's true, that's not true, that's not true, that is true empirically. But what I can do is I can look at how that belief functions and see, is that harmful? Is that bringing love? Is that bringing healing and hope and restoration? Is that retributive? Is that bringing division or us versus them mentality? You know, and you can see some of this. Is that escapism? Is that leading to someone not engaging in the world around them because they're just trying to escape the world and they think Jesus is coming back in the next Tuesday, and then it's the next Tuesday, and then it's next Wednesday, and you know, it's like, so that is that how their belief is functioning? That's not bearing fruit, any sort of good fruit at least. And that's how I've managed to navigate that minefield of what's right and what's wrong, because realistically there is one right way, like Richie was saying, but we don't necessarily have the evidence to be able to determine which one is. So that's the best way I've managed to kind of do that. Because it's not easy.
No.
I'll add I'll maybe take it from a different, not point of view, maybe a different vantage, I guess. For me, when I think about religion, Christianity, belief systems, I'm quite happy saying they're inescapably a culture, which means they're inescapably human-made. Like every religion, every belief system is
absolutely
is a human-made thing. So Christianity, people say, did it? You know, the way I see it, yeah, I'm very happy saying Christianity is a man-made religion. When you look at it as a whole, you know, the religion, you know, my Christian experience in Perth is very, very different to the Christian experience of my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. They have a very, you know, we are literally neighbors, and we would both claim very similar things about Christianity, but their experience of it and the way they enact it is very different. So there's like that.
Well, the African American church in America,
totalizing thing. But and as a total thing, Much of it's pragmatic. Much of it is just I do because this is what I was given, and I can't examine every little piece without, like, I can't explode my life and put it back together and still live. So I can only take parts out and examine them at a time. So we talked about, and I think this will be a good conversation, Peter, going forward, is the geographic nature of especially religion.
I've just written geographical talk on my piece of paper right now because I think that's fascinating.
I know I am a Christian and not a Hindu or something else because I grew up in a country where that is predominant.
Absolutely.
So that's where I started. But what I can do is take chunks of that belief and examine it and go, for instance, I was taught that the world is about 6 to 10,000 years old, created in 7 days. Evolution is a lie. That's what I was taught. And how would I start with anything else? I have to believe what I was taught by those in authority. But there has to become a time when I start encountering some evidence that says, that's not true. I take that belief off and I examine it. And I find it completely ludicrously wanting in evidence. And I either can then go, I just hold on to it because those in power hold power over me and I have to toe the line. And if I had a job as a pastor, that might be a consideration, but no one's paying me to believe anything. So I can easily throw that out. I might get excommunicated. I might get off the preaching roster and all that sort of stuff. But I'm 46 now. I don't care.
You're a heretic, mate.
I'm much more heretic, committed to truth than dogma. Yeah. So I take it out and go, okay. But there's other bits that orbit around that. I can't examine it all at once. So I hold this intention that I do know there's a whole bunch of stuff I still quote unquote believe without evidence. But I'm making my way through some stuff. And I will follow the evidence wherever it leads, but I will work gently at it because belief is a very human thing. We believe things, and I'm not talking about religious belief. We believe things, and so it's a very human thing. It's a very precious thing that we shouldn't just trash. We should treat it with care as we're moving forward. Don't just wholesale burn everything to the ground because it's going to damage you. But honestly, take things out and examine it. So I think there's content of our beliefs that we can examine quite closely, and I think that's something we could do. We had a previous conversation. Let's take prayer and does it work? What do we mean? And examine it closely, and we can start finding that we'll disagree. I guarantee the three of us would disagree about that in very sharp ways. But at least we can examine that thing closely, and we can talk about what evidence means. But when we talk about belief systems as a whole, they're very complex things with lots of moving parts. What I will say to finish before I hand back to you, Peter, is that what I totally reject is what I was given growing up, which is this version of Christianity that was totalizing. Like it said, we've got the truth about every single thing here in our church, not the church, but our church. It was totalizing. We can tell you the truth about creation and evolution. We can tell you the truth about mental illness. We can tell you the truth about how, sexuality. We can tell you the truth about any subject because we got the total truth in our thing. And I think on the face of it, that cannot be true. The people making that claim have no authority to be talking about, molecular biology or counseling or human psychology. So this totalizing claim, to me, I reject outright. And I think, Peter, you and I would agree on that. Probably 100%. All three of us would agree on it. But I think the content of the beliefs is interesting to examine them in detail, and we can start looking at some of those. But I've gone on my Richard rant for a little while now. So
look, I agree entirely. I mean, we are prone to believe. Our whole lives are believing in stuff. A lot of it with really bad evidence. A lot of it no evidence at all. It doesn't seem to really matter. If you have a look at some of the crazy beliefs of which we may touch on down the track that people have, and people. There was I can't think of his name now. Mirror, Australian guy was doing a doco on different beliefs of detoxing and proving that it was just a complete waste of time, stuff like that. And it was just amazing, the amount of self-appointed experts. So you don't have to go to school. You don't have to learn anything. You can just put up a sign saying, I can read your palms and read tarot cards, and there you go. Pay me and I'll tell you about your future. No education necessarily needed. I remember I had a woman on when I was working in Mandarin radio there. I did an interview with her, and she claimed to be able to, by my birth date, tell me things about myself and my deceased family and whatever. And I said, look, that's a big claim. Let's talk about this. Tell me about my father. Every single thing she said about my dad, you could not have picked a wrong description of a cheeky, smoking gentleman. And at the end, she said, is that him? I said, you've got every single aspect of my father 100% wrong. What happened? What happened? She said, I can't always get it right. I went, no, that's not your claim. Your claim was, you can tell me right now about my father because he's there with you in spirit talking to you. What did you get wrong? Oh, look, no, it doesn't work the way I said. Yes, it does. It really does. That's not my father that you were talking about. And you claimed that you could contact him. He's there with you talking to him. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as, self-appointed people who claim to be experts and be able to talk to dead people and stuff. And if you're watching either when this is live, which is right now, it is, what is it, the 6th of December, 2023, or you're watching it down the track tomorrow or whatever, keep this in mind that you can be a part of this discussion. We will continue next Wednesday, and hopefully we'll have other things to talk about. Just a short list. Some of you guys have said some things already about what we could talk about. The geographical issue, I think, is an absolute doozy.
Fascinating.
Absolute doozy. For those of you who listening don't know what that means, is that, geographically it's convenient if you want to be a Hindu to be born in India. It's convenient if you're American or English or some other Western country where you want to be a Christian. Good news. That's the God that reigns supreme in this country, kind of, as it were. So that's very confusing, the geographical part of belief. Also, the amount of gods. I want to go back and talk about the amount of gods that there used to be and how they've all been eradicated because science proved that they were only there to fill in the gaps because we didn't understand what was causing thunder and lightning and floods and all that stuff. So they had a god. Science has gotten rid of all the gods except for a couple. So we'll talk about that as well.
They're making a comeback with some movies there, Loki and Zeus, and they're coming back.
Yeah.
And look, they had a reason for being.
Yeah.
Let's not completely disqualify what they were there creative. The people were ignorant. There was no understanding of micro organisms with sickness and thunder and lightning. They needed to come up with an explanation as to why that was there, and they were perfectly normal in doing that.
Well, there was no such thing as natural or supernatural. It was just supernatural. If something happened, the god or gods or that's what happened. We have an understanding of the natural world or natural phenomena, but that wasn't it wasn't even a category in ancient days. And you see that reflected in the Bible. I won't divert us, but it's very interesting. That's a great topic.
But what also interesting is every culture that I'm aware of in the world, exclusive to their location, if they've never seen other people in the world, but they just live in the jungles of wherever, each one of those cultures, including the oldest culture in the world, 50,000 plus years, the Aboriginal people in Australia, all come up with stuff in the sky. Now, whether that's because that's what they can see with the planets and stars and all sorts of stuff. So every culture has its own gods and its own belief system. Call it whatever you like. It's incredible. That's not a coincidence. That's something else, perhaps certainly beyond my depth of knowledge to discuss too much about it. But it is absolutely it's fascinating. It is incredible. We are a people that loves to believe in all sorts of things. Some of them are true, some of them are folly. I guess the decision and the way to maneuver yourself around in your life is to work out which ones are real and which ones are folly, or give up and go, I don't know, but I'm going to go with this one anyway. That was not a dig, by the way, guys. Please don't feel
No, you're
in
fine.
any way.
I was just going to say we could roll some dice or something as well. There's a third option.
That's right.
Build a religion based on a 10-sided dice.
Yeah, the dice has spoken.
The dice has spoken.
Actually, that sounds actually rather familiar. A little bit too close to home, actually.
I think you've already done that one.
Yeah, we've done it as recently as the Book of Acts, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, casting.
Okay, moving along, Peter.
Well, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes to go to wrap up what we've been talking about. Look, it has been a little while in the making. It was a bit shaky to start with, but I think we've ironed out a lot of bugs, and I think we've got the format. If you have just joined us or you're watching whenever, it's hard to know who's watching it live and who's watching it at a late date. But this is a new podcast called Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible. It's a bit of an experiment, putting an atheist with two Christians. Usually it's all atheists or all Christians. But we're sort of, we're to try and navigate our way through our disagreements and trying to come to a point where we may change our minds about some things. One of the questions I do want you guys to ponder for next week, which I want to ask you, which I might do right off the top next week, and this is going to be a doozy. What would it take for you to experience or see or feel or learn that would make you stop believing in God? It may be nothing. I think, to be honest and to be sincere about it, you'd have to come up with something that would actually make it. And when you find that incredibly difficult and challenging to do, which it will be, there's a place there in your heart, in your mind, which you can think about what it would be like for someone like myself. What would it take for me to reignite my relationship that I once had with God? I know what it would take for me. I don't know what it would take for you guys to say, I'm done. I cannot possibly work this one out. I cannot, in all my conscience, say this is acceptable, or I don't know, fill in the gaps. Think about it. We're talking about it next week.
That's a very good question. I love it.
Amazing question.
Yeah, I'm glad I've already know mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't envy your position. Luke, you want to just wrap up something before we say goodnight?
I just think this is an important space. Very, very important, because it's a unique situation where we can actually engage in questions without, neither of us are trying to convert the other. There's not this weird there's not
That's
this
next
weird
week's question, actually.
You preempted.
Oh yeah, I'll just trick you into saying a prayer and putting your hand up. It'll be fine. It's there's not this like apologetics where you watch these debates where neither of those sides are willing to change their position. They're just waiting for their chance to talk, and they're just they're just going at it. I think there's a very real wrestling, and sadly, in a lot of churches, this space for these questions isn't made available. In some churches, that it is, which is great, but in the majority, there isn't. And so, I want to encourage anyone who watches this to actually do that, to be able to reach out and ask the tough questions and get real answers. They might not be the right answer, but if it's not, we just say we don't know. But to actually engage with it and wrestle with these things is for me, it's worship. I think it's beautiful.
Right.
And it actually brings people closer. And if that's not the point of the whole thing, what are we doing? If this sort of dialogue doesn't break down barriers and actually engage in this sort of stuff, if you just want to rock up on a Sunday, sing some songs and go about your merry day, and you're afraid to ask a question, that's just pretty boring. This is the meat of it. This is where I think genuine faith and relationship happens, whether you agree on things or not. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
I think there's two there's two types of people, isn't it, that believe they just want to go along for the ride. They're not interested in questioning. They're just quite happy with the status quo, and off they go. Or there's those people who do want to ask and feel comfortable. I think a lot of people feel scared and threatened to be able to have the audacity to question God, and so it keeps them locked into this subservient kind of attitude toward the church. And I think that in itself is very scary. And then that's why, and this will be another conversation down the track, which we have many to come. That's why televangelists are so filthy rich, because the poor souls who don't have any money have been told that if they give money, they'll get it 100-fold back from God, and they just absolutely milk these poor people dry and make themselves filthy rich. And they are an absolute blight. I won't even say they're a blight on Christianity, because I see no connection between them and God whatsoever. It's just an exploitative thing that they do, and it's disgusting. Rich?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So if we just got to put the banner across now, just for people to be able to give into this now. If
support the podcast.
tenfold blessings upon you and your household for every $10 increment you donate.
So he's already on it.
He sounds well too rehearsed in that line.
I know, that rolled off the tongue so easy, didn't it?
No.
Until he got paid to be a pastor at one time. No,
Give us nothing.
No,
just give us your time. That's all we ask for.
Send us your money. We'll send double back to you.
Whoa.
Peter will.
I've just retired, mate. I've got nothing.
Sorry, Rich, you go.
Well, I'm really glad to be a part of this. Again, this conversation needs to be had. I find it quite interesting about the three viewpoints. We've talked a bit about it. I see Peter really grabbing onto that evidentiary side of things. I think there's some really important conversations to have about that. Luke, a lot of your speeches around connection, relationship. There's a important bit about belief, but don't be one of those people about it. I was going to say a swear word, but I still can't do it because I'm still a good Christian boy.
Bullshit.
But for me, I guess my perspective is this intellectual aesthetic. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go with this. I don't think this is an experiment that hasn't really been done before. I think there's going to be some good results from it. I'm really looking forward to digging it in. Keep coming back. A lot of what we're going to be talking about, we want to be driven by your questions. So send them in, put the comments up. We'll start talking out there and getting some questions. This will be fascinating. But it's not meant to be comfortable. It's not meant to be feel good. It's not meant to be, we all finish this all hugging, high-fiving each other because we're all, come to some agreement. That's not the point of it. If you're honest, there's hard conversations to have, and I hope we have them. So I'm looking forward to where we're going with this. Important. If it's worth believing, it's worth believing the true stuff. So.
Yeah, also important to know that if you do send us a question, try and play nice, and we will not in any way, shape, or form bag you out or criticize you or put you down or embarrass you, anything like that. We just want a genuine conversation, and it is healthy, very healthy, to disagree and to question, and not to just take something because someone said it. In every aspect of life, I think it's a very healthy thing to do. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Feel free to question me on what I've done is kind of a bit, left of center for most Christian people I know, most of which no longer talk to me, of course, because I'm not sharing their faith, which in itself is a sad indictment on modern Christianity in the church, I think. But anyway, feel free to throw some questions at me if you're wondering, where I'm at and where I'm sitting and why I did what I did. For you listening, either live now or next week or whenever, love to have you come back. YouTube streamed live. We have to do is go into YouTube and put in Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible, and you'll see the YouTube stream coming up there. We might try and get it onto Spotify, I think you said, Rich, earlier on. And also, if you're a part of a church, This is the kind of conversation that I would imagine would go off like a frog in a sock in a church. People talking about this kind of stuff. It's really, it's important. I'm done with all the Christian side of things, but I'm still interested in this now. So it's why I'm here. It's why I've wanted to put this whole thing together. After spending 25 years in the church and then getting out, I thought, this is different. This is something that I haven't heard anyone do before. That's why we've done it. Thank you so much for watching. Lovely to have you back again. Same time. Now we're in Perth, Western Australia. Okay, so we're in a different time zone to just about everyone on the planet. But next week it'll be 8 p.m., which is Australian Western Standard Time. Is that right?
Yeah, GMT plus 8.
Wednesday night, which will be the 12th of December. So join us then if you can. Richard and Luke, thank you so much for helping me get through this. It worked. We did it.
Awesome. We had a great time. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Luke.
You guys take care.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.